A pair of blockbuster trades that went down in the first night of the 2022 NFL Draft sent a couple of star wide receivers elsewhere. Marquise Hollywood Brown was sent from Baltimore to the Arizona Cardinals, while A.J. Brown was sent from the Tennessee Titans to the Philadelphia Eagles. Matt, I got a very simple question for you. Which of these Browns, Hollywood or A.J., is the most impactful in the new spot?
I think AJ. I mean, first of all, just from comparison as far as stats and what he's been able to do, I think AJ is pretty far ahead of Marquise as far as output goes. This is a guy that's been on the best wide receiver on playoff contending teams, on AFC championship contending teams. Whether they were able to do it or not is a whole other point. But AJ has been that guy. If you watch that game against Cincinnati, he was a huge reason why they were in it to begin with. This is a guy that can take over a game. And when you're looking at a Eagles team that was actually able to make it to the playoffs, that is kind of finishing or at the very end of a quick rebuild from that Super Bowl they won a couple of years ago. This is the type of addition that really can give you a jump start. And when you look at a young quarterback like Jalen Hurts, it's a great target for him to have. And also they're playing in a very weak NFC East as far as it being a consistently poor division. And the NFC is fairly wide open. We've talked about it before. Certainly. So adding him to a team that made the playoffs last year, played okay against Tampa Bay in that wild card round, I think it's a great addition. I think A.J. Brown is really going to be a fan favorite and a helpful addition to the Philadelphia Eagles.
No doubt about it. I mean, obviously, out the gate, A.J. Brown is the more talented player of these two, and I think he's going to be great in Philadelphia. I think getting Jalen Hurts a true bona fide number one wide receiver like A.J. Brown would do wonders for his development. As good as Devontae Smith is, I think A.J. Brown is just on a different level, and he's shown that throughout his first few years early on in the league. But I think the answer in terms of most impactful, I think that's going to be Hollywood Brown this season with the Arizona Cardinals. I mean, this is a dude who has 21 receiving touchdowns over his last 3 seasons. Is only 3 seasons in the NFL. He had over 1,000 receiving yards last season in a run-first offense, a run-heavy offense. And also, too, with the quarterback in Lamar Jackson, as great as he is and explosive as he is, Hollywood Brown is not going to be catching passes from Kyler Murray, who is in a different class as a passer than Lamar Jackson. So that's going to just improve his targets, his chances at catching and making big plays. And I think also, too, just the card system, them being more of a pass-happy offense is going to do wonders for his numbers that, up to this point, A.J. Brown has kind of, overlapped him. And you also got to, keep in consideration, too, that Kyler Murray, Hollywood Brown were former college teammates who obviously still want to play with each other. They said that the reunion was always in the plans. Also, the loss of DeAndre Hopkins for 6 games of the regular season is going to make Hollywood Brown's presence in that offense a necessity. And I think with his absence, it's going to open up opportunities for Hollywood Brown, especially with the exit of Christian Kirk from that receiving corps now in Jacksonville. There's going to be a lot of more opportunities for him. And, with Zach Ertz, A.J. Green back in the fold, Wesley, and those other guys, I think Hollywood Brown is probably the biggest name early on in that season. That's what it's going to be. Hollywood has shown that he's explosive, that he can make big plays, and he's going to need to bring that to Arizona, especially early on in the absence of DeAndre Hopkins.
Well, and I think that's going to be the biggest question and I think that's the difference and why I side with A.J. Brown a little bit more is because when the Cardinals made the trade for Hollywood Brown, yes, part of it is because they realized they needed to find somebody to help out with DeAndre Hopkins gone. But you bring in Hollywood Brown to be your number 2 wide receiver, and DeAndre is going to be your number 1. Correct. You bring in A.J. Brown to be your number 1 wide receiver, and then you basically have in Devontae Smith, he's not a 2 by any means. He'd be more like a 1B, almost like what Kansas City has with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill when they had those two. And I think that's the biggest difference as far as like A.J. Brown is coming in and he is the number 1 guy. Hollywood is number 1 right now because of circumstance. Once Hopkins comes back, he'll be the 2, which I think is going to be a great setup for him. And I think that's one of the reasons he struggled a little bit in Baltimore.
I also think in terms of where these 2 guys are going, I think their situations are obviously going to be different, talking about where they came from. A.J. Brown was also kind of in a run-first offense, but, when you have somebody like Derrick Henry, who defenses have to game plan for, who defenses have to have 7, 8 guys in the box for, I would say there was a handful of times, a lot of the times that A.J. Brown was afforded one-on-one coverage because you have to game plan. Derrick Henry is, objective number one when you're playing the Tennessee Titans. He's not gonna defenses when you're playing Philadelphia. A.J. Brown is enemy number one now at this point. Obviously, you have to take in consideration Jalen Hurts and his legs as well. But I think it's going to be interesting to see how A.J. Brown adapts, how A.J. Brown plays without, with Derrick Henry. And also, too, I mentioned it, Hollywood Brown is going from Lamar Jackson, as great as he is, to Kyler Murray, a much improved passer, whereas A.J. Brown is going from Ryan Tannehill, say what you want about him, to Jalen Hurts, say what you want about him. I think those two quarterbacks are similar at this point in their careers.
Yes,
so I think, Hollywood Brown, again, is just going to be in a much better situation. And he's already done pretty damn well for himself. And again, a run-first offense, a quarterback who loves to use his legs more than anything. So should be interesting to see how it shakes out.
It definitely will be. I think a little bit more pressure on Hollywood Brown, though, too, because the Cardinals have had 2 seasons now where they started out so hot, they've fallen apart towards the end. And I feel like you bring in a guy like Hollywood Brown because you want to take that team to the next level where they've been kind of at a plateau as of right now. So
do you think there's more pressure on Hollywood Brown than A.J. Brown in this situation?
I think there's more pressure in general on the Cardinals, and because of making that move, especially because, you could definitely use that first-round draft pick to address some of the needs that the Cardinals had.
Sure.
To bring him in suggests that they think that they're very close to getting to that next level.
Yeah, I think they are.
And so I think that's the reason why. I mean, Philly, you could argue, is still trying to figure everything out and is still building towards that. There's not as much pressure on them to win in the postseason as much as it is just to get there.
No.
And then let's see what happens.
But if we're talking about pressure in terms of player, I would say there's more pressure on A.J. Brown. As you mentioned, he's being brought in to be the guy, to be the number one. Whereas, Hollywood Brown, maybe first 6 weeks of the season, they need him to be that guy. But once DeAndre Hopkins steps back into the fold, Hollywood Brown can be in his more comfortable position as a number 2, slot explosive receiver. So in terms of pressure, I think it's A.J. Brown, but impact, I think Hollywood Brown's going to be off to a scorching hot start to the season. And we've seen that. We've seen that in the last couple of years. Arizona has started the year as hot as anybody in the NFL over the last 2 seasons.
It's about continuing it.
Exactly.
Football can't come soon enough, honestly.
Truly. We can't wait. But let us know in the comments who you think is going to have the most impactful season. Hollywood Brown, A.J. Brown. Let us know something. But until next episode of The Simple Question, for Scott Proctor and Matt Morris right here, we'll see you next.